of it all, untouchable, a new animal. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made.
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another week of LSH Live. This video is going to be Learning from the Legends Part 2. I think it's such a big deal to learn from the people that are super established in this industry. So much you can learn from sitting and watching the warm-up pen if you know what to look for. So we're going to be covering that today, teaching you guys what to look for, teaching you guys who the big dogs are, and how to follow their lead a little bit, and get your horse in these positions. So I'm Jeremy LaRose. Let's jump into this. There are, in my opinion, two styles of Western pleasure trainers out there. There is the Southern Western style of trainer, and there's the Northern Eastern style of trainer. So depending where you are geographically here in the United States, the guys from down south do things very differently from the guys from up north. So down south, I think they believe more in turning horses around, rolling them around, getting them a lot softer, getting their parts and pieces broke loose. I think it stems from how out there, the arenas are bigger. They've got wider spaces to ride because they don't have to cover them. They don't have to heat them. So you've got a lot more room to ride, a lot more area to ride in. And then the horses, as a background, had to do things. So when these horses got started, they were originally ranch horses. Pleasure evolved from that down there. The guys from up north tend to capture horses up more. They tend to ride the rail more. These horses typically don't progress into all-around horses. You see more of the Western style from up north go down the rail, go straight, travel really slow, and not make the jump into all-around horses as easily because of that. So we're going to be focusing on our guys from down south, the three legends that I like to watch all the time. Two well-established legends and one up-and-coming that certainly is going to change the industry and has already. The first rider that we will be taking a look at today is Mr. Rusty Green. So he is number one on the NSBA Lifetime Earners in Open Western Pleasure Class. He has earned $1,050,000. So he actually just replaced Gil in the number one spot this year. An outstanding trainer, had countless legends out of countless legends on top of countless legends. So an incredible trainer, and not only in the Western Pleasure. So if you've watched his horses progress, he actually has made them into Western riders. He's shown the trail. He's done a lot of different events, and an outstanding pleasure trainer. One of the things that I always really enjoy watching about Rusty's horses is how flexible they are. So you don't see Rusty lunge a whole lot. He usually rides them, and he'll ride them with draw reins on. He'll push them around and get their body moving. And this move right here is something you'll see him do a lot, where he takes her head to the inside, shapes her hip on the inside, and jogs them up into it. So he really believes in having a lot of hip control, a lot of body control on his horses. And this is a good maneuver for all you guys to do at home, getting your horse to where it'll take its head over its lead foot here. So he's bringing his head over his left foot, asking his hip to stay on the left and jogging through, and just continue stepping forward, keeping that really good rhythm. One of the things that I always watch for here when I'm watching these guys ride is the way they enter their horse's mouth, the way they take a hold of the bit and what their horse does. So you can see Rusty come in with his hands really slow and soft here, and the horse stays in frame. It doesn't fling its head up. It doesn't push against the bridle. It doesn't leave. It doesn't get nervous about this. And there's something to be said for that, right? If you come in aggressively with your hands and your horse is afraid of your hands, you're going to get one that leaves and just doesn't do what you want it to do. This horse understands what its job is, understands it's going to come in here. He's going to ask it to be soft. It's got to step through. Getting that respect out of your hands and that trust out of your horse's mouth is so important. This horse willingly gives the bridle as he picks up his hands soft and slow. Going home and trying this with your own horses, where you pick up the bridle and just see what your horse does, give it a chance to respond instead of moving quickly with your hands, forcing it to give its face. Try to just ask, right? And there's something to be said for asking your horse a question and waiting to see the response. A lot of the times we get in a hurry thinking about what we want them to do, and we don't actually ask them, what do you do? What do you know to do when I put you in this spot? Do you know to give up and give me your face and be supple? Or are you going to resist and lift your neck up above your withers and push against my hands and shut your stride down? You've got to get your horse to where it will just willingly step up into this. You see, because this isn't a big deal, this horse can keep stepping forward in its jog and it doesn't change its legs. So in order to do this position well, we're going to have a few corners of control on our horse. The first thing he's going to ask for is his horse's head to come to the left. So his left hand comes in, horse's head comes to the left. It's going to take some left leg to keep this horse from falling over and turning left. This is the big reason why we say that this horse should never turn when we pick up this rein. It should turn when we pick up the outside rein and we add that outside leg into it. Your horse has got to steer off your outside aids so that you have this kind of flexibility on the inside. That being said, he's going to use his outside rein to ask this horse to give its chin into its shoulder. So he's putting this horse's chin over its inside shoulder, bringing its chin close to the point of its inside shoulder. And you see how soft this horse is. You see his hands just come up, out, up, out, up, out. He's using his wrists here. He's not banging out of his elbow. He's not banging out of his shoulder. This horse is really, really soft, and he's got it in a tough position. He's using his outside leg here, back by its hip, to push its hip to the inside. And one of the cool parts about that is his horse is in this really tough shape. It's got its hip over its inside, but it's not losing its stride at all. Part of the reason is because if you watch this white front foot, this also right front foot, the white foot doesn't step over to the right. So it's holding a strong line. Imagine if there was a rail right here on his right side. It's not stepping past that line. It's driving straight forward. What you're going to do with your horses when you put them in the shape for the first few times is you're going to take their head to the left and they're going to go to the right. And you're going to see that horse's right shoulder leak out. We want that leg to stay under control. We want that leg to stay in line. Otherwise, we're going to end up short striding on the left front and long striding on the right front. And that's a lot of where that funky front leg comes from that we addressed in the other video, where you get to long stepping your outside front and short stepping your inside. We want to have a horse that'll hold that line really, really strong and bring that across. And Rusty will actually turn this trot into a lope from this shape. And he's got his horse really captured up here, and he's going to ask it to lift, and it's going to have to go up into the air underneath of him and not make a move away from him. So a couple things to keep in mind when you're doing this maneuver, because you can make a lot of bad habits right here. Don't throw away your outside hand. Don't throw your right rein away so that horse can leave. You see how he's got that rein right on this horse's shoulder? Stopping the movement so it stays underneath of itself and doesn't roll its rib cage around. If you can keep your horse's rib cage square underneath of you and not let it roll out to the outside using your outside rein and your outside leg, then this maneuver is really, really good for teaching your horse to step deep underneath itself with its hock and not lose motion and lose fluidity through it. Another horse that we want to take a look at here is one that Natasha Blanchard owns, and it's Made in the Shade. So this horse was 2017 NSBA Horse of the Year. This is going to be Katie Green riding him. This is Rusty Green's wife, and we're going to be addressing this turnaround that she just did right there. So the turnaround to me is really important and something that the Texas guys and the guys from out west do really well. The turnaround, they're going to pull this inside rein, ask this horse to follow its shoulders around, and then lope off, but lope off straight ahead. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, is they're going to turn their horse around, and they're going to lope off, and they're going to allow it to fall down to the inside. And she's not going to let this horse fall back down. So she's trying to get softness out of its withers, softness in its body, and really rock back over its back end, and then lift hard up into the air here and lope off up underneath of her, but straight ahead. So when you go home and you do this on your own, don't go and let your horse fall over to the left. Very common to do, very easy to do. Don't let it fall over because you're going to cause a whole mess of problems for yourself down the road. Another important piece to keep in mind here is look at how there's no sense of urgency or rush out of her in this maneuver. She turns him around, she lets him wait for his lope off, and she doesn't rush him. She's not attacking him with her spurs. She's not jerking him through the turnaround. She's not spurring the crap out of him through the turn itself. She's asking him to be handy. She's asking him to get around his legs and get up in his body. But when she goes to lope off here, you see her just squeeze both spurs, let that horse come up to her. You don't see her outside foot do much at all here, and that's one of the most common problems that I see when I go places, is that people will attack horses with their outside spur, and then they wonder why they don't lope off soft and slow like this one. If we want this horse to rock up and back to us, we've got to A, give him time to think, and B, let him set himself up and get confident there. We can't jack him with our spurs and jab him and have him jump through that lope off, because it's not going to end up being that close to the ground pleasure lope that you're looking for in the end. So she's using this turnaround to get him soft through his body and soften his withers. And you see a little bit of resistance right here. And she just goes after him with her feet, right? So she's going to tap her feet and lift his belly. And when his belly is up, then his neck will stay down. So remember, you've seen us go through this training process where we take these horses' chins and put them to their chest. And then there comes a time where in the finishing stages of this horse, we've got to have him take his nose out. If you look at the way he lopes out of this and the way he lopes after this turnaround, you see he's got his nose out, he's got his neck flat. We want to see him come out of this turn and keep his neck flat through the turn, and then lope and stay down in the bridle but with his nose out. So we can't have our horse go slow or look good underneath because we're holding onto their face. Eventually, we're going to have them broke loose in their withers left to right, to where they'll stay down in their neck and lift up underneath of us and then poke their nose back out in the end. This is a great maneuver for a finished horse. Certainly something that's a little bit more difficult to do in the middle of the arena. Your horse has really got to stay up underneath you will. Another important piece to notice about this is that she's not going to jerk his face down or back if he does leave the bridle. What she's going to do is just put him back in another turn. And a lot of people try to fight that out rather than saying, hey, if you don't do this right, we're just going to do another one until you do. A lot of people want to take a hold of him and fight that chin pushing out there instead of saying, well, my horse was just in the wrong spot and I got to go back and do another one. The last rider that we'll be taking a look at today is Mr. Aaron Moses himself. So Aaron is one of the young guns in the industry, if you're not familiar with him. He's won a ton of stuff lately. He's had some absolutely incredible horses. He is number 47 on the NSBA money earners list for Western Pleasure, earning just a little over $158,000 in the class, which is extremely impressive at his age. The horse that we're going to be taking a look at today is going to be Lope with Grace, which is not this one, but it's a big mare. If you remember Hallie's mare Gifted Invitation, she was huge. So this is her baby. So obviously a really, really good mom. But this is a great horse. It's done a lot of winning in its life. I think he won the 3s with it here at the NSBA World this year, and he won the 2s with it last year, and I think won the Masters with it as well. So certainly a really good horse. But what I want to focus on here is more about how Aaron rides and what he's doing with this horse as it goes around. So let's take a look at it. Aaron is probably one of the most interesting trainers to me to watch ride because he does so much out of his seat. And he just has so much feel and timing with his seat. And he teaches his horse to follow his seat and his timing and rhythm so well. So this right here, this move where he's posting this lope, has been kind of a hot topic lately in the Western Pleasure world. Some people saying it's not correct. They don't want to see it. And they're kind of helping that horse out. And we want to see a horse carry itself around. But that doesn't mean that we can't use that as a training tool and as an aid to help our riding get better, right? So even if we don't want to see it in the show pen, doesn't mean we can't use it here at home and just get a good feel for the timing and the rhythm of the lope, which is something that Aaron just has a ton of feel for. One of the biggest things about his horses is that they show so well. And part of that, I think, is due to how much practice they get being left alone. I think when I was coming up, I felt like I always had to be doing something on my horse. And a lot of times my horse just wasn't in a good position anyway. And I did need to be doing something on it to try to make it better. But once you've got your horse to where it's soft and supple and you've got its body position right, then it's time to just set it down and let it practice. For me, this is probably the hardest part of horse training. I like to be doing something. I like to be active. I like to feel like I'm helping that horse. Remember that when we go to show these horses, it's about self-carriage. So we've got to set this horse down and let it practice and let it get its time in. This video was taken over the course of like an hour. And I mean, he got 40 minutes straight of loping. Just turn around, lope the other way. Turn around, lope the other way. Follow the rail. Don't leave the rail. Got his horse super comfortable on the rail. Got it super comfortable listening to him and making sure that it knew its job. So think about this just like you would at work. If you guys were at your day-to-day life and you were out in your job, do you want your boss sitting over your shoulder harping on you about everything that you're doing? Or would it be better to have your boss say, hey, how's it going? Okay, good. Great. I'm going to leave you alone. And that's kind of the mentality you want to have with your horse when you go to put the finishing touches on it. And that's what we're looking at here is a really finished horse that we're just kind of warming up for the day, making sure it's listening to us, making sure that it's doing its job well. Another piece that's important here is when you watch this horse lope around and you watch him stop and turn around and lope off, again, just like you saw with Katie, we're not kicking these horses. We're not putting the boots to them. We're not grinding and raking our outside spur. Remember, we want these horses to give us a lot. So it's one of those things where it's so counterintuitive because you feel like if you spur your horse really hard, it'll give you more. And for the vast majority of horses that I've run into in my career, that is not the case at all. The softer you are, the more that horse will give you. And that's really what we're trying to get here, is a horse that gives us a ton. So if you look at this horse right here, almost picture perfect back end where its outside hind doesn't step in front of its inside hind. So that inside hind stays engaged all the time. That's what we're looking for. So that's that lift behind. And that's why this horse is able to go so slow. Now, Aaron, I think, is leading the way in pushing horses out in the show pen and showing them more forward, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to practice drawing them back and starting a little bit slower. So remember, we try to train to extremes, and then when we go to the show pen, it's much easier for a horse to move on and go forward. So I promise you he would never show this slow. I've seen him go off the rail and pass probably more than anybody in the last year. Heart Stopping, like I said, was one of the most amazing horses, especially 2-year-olds, that I've seen, and he showed it forward the whole time. So I think he's really setting the tone for what our Western pleasure horses are going to look like. But it's interesting to see how slow they're able to go if they really rock up and roll hard, which is one of the cool things about Aaron's horses. I think a lot of that has to do with how he uses his seat to get off their back. So I want to take a look at that a little more in depth here. You can see it more in the second pass. How he lifts his seat up off their back. There's air between the back of his saddle and his butt. And that air lets this horse lift its belly. So he's squeezing his spurs, asking his horse to stay up underneath of him as he lifts up off their back. I'm a firm believer that if you're sitting on their back like a sack of potatoes, they are not going to lift into you when you're pushing down on them. One of the most interesting things to watch about his stops here, see that horse really tucks its hind end up to its front feet, and it's ready to back up right away. So that outside front hits the dirt, stops, and does not push forward until he asks it to lope off, where it lifts up and rocks up to him. So that's a big deal. We talk about how your spurs should mean bring your hinds forward, but don't step your front end forward. And you can really see that in his stops. And that's super consistent with the way his horses go. All of his horses will stop like this. All of Rusty's horses will stop like this. And a lot of those big guys' horses stop just like this, where they tuck their hind end up to their front feet. And then when he lopes off here, you see it drop its neck down, pop up, lope off from the back end first. It doesn't step forward with its outside front. Its inside front stays way out in front of its outside. Really, really nice lope off, and a good horse afterwards, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for, trying to get that horse to pop up underneath of us, stay tucked up behind. When you stop, the idea is that you're retucking your horse, you're resetting it. So make sure that it does retuck and doesn't dribble forward with its front end. When he goes to lope off here, you'll really see him lift his seat up out of the saddle for the first 3 or 4 strides and help that horse get up, help it get its hind underneath of it. So right here, a lope off, up out of the saddle, up out of the saddle, way up out of the saddle. Let that horse push you up into the air. If you're trying to stay tight to the leather and you're pushing back down in that horse's butt, there's no way it's going to lift up that back end and propel you up into the air. After he gets going here, after he settles down, finds his rhythm, you'll see him sit down and stay a lot closer to the horse. But he uses that lope off the same way we do. If you've been to one of our clinics, we show you guys how to pop up off the saddle, driving up into the air as that inside hind, outside front comes up. So encouraging your horse, giving it room to step up underneath of you so that it can keep that back end engaged. And that's one of the big things about this horse. If you look at how it keeps its loin up in the air, driving up. If you're riding a lope and you can't post it, then you're riding too far forward. You're riding your horse front to back instead of thinking about that lope as a gait that travels up and down. If you're not thinking about your lope as traveling up and down, you're never going to be able to go slow and look good doing it. That's it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I had a blast making this one. These are some of the guys that I've really paid attention to over the years and tried to learn from and grow from and just try to mimic and take things away from. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the better off you'll be. Remember, we're trying to build a good foundation on our horse here and a good foundation for our riding. And you cannot build a good foundation if all you have is a hammer and a nail. You've got to have all the different tools in order to build a good foundation. So thank you so much for tuning in. We love you guys. Hope you have a great week. Hope you had a great weekend. And I will see you next week in the next video.